church should want to have families like his. What does that? Lead by
Example.
example. Exactly. Okay. Our next word is teknon. Teknon. This one's not a difficult one to transliterate here. T-E. Okay. N-O-N. And this word means child. Child.
Child?
Child.
Singular or plural?
I'm bringing it to the non-singular there. So, but in this particular case, I think it is in the singular, but I didn't write it down. But it is talking about child in the general sense, so it probably is in the singular case. This is a child, an offering of human parents, okay? If he is a pastoral candidate, his relationship to his children should be examined. What do you think about that? Once again, if he can't manage his own household, then can he be a good leader in the church? Okay. So what we have here is, does being childless disqualify him?
No.
Okay. We've already talked about earlier that that was not Paul's intention when we talked about he doesn't have to necessarily be married. Okay. He doesn't necessarily have to have children. Okay. But it definitely helps because he can learn those skills of managing his household, which will help him as he is a pastor. Is there a particular age recognized here?
He hasn't left the home.
Well, culturally, there is sort of an age difference here because a person in the time in which the Bible was written, in particular the New Testament, which was, still a lot of Jewish cultural in that area, as well as Roman culture, and people were considered to be adults, usually over the age of 13. When they got into their teen years, okay, for the Jewish, that was the bar mitzvah time, so they had turned 13, and they were now considered to be a man, okay? Now, if you think about this, generally at that age, they start making a lot of decisions in their life that they didn't before that time. Although our culture is pushing them younger and younger to do these things, okay? But as a general rule, at that age, they can start making sound or unsound decisions, really. So I'm not specifically saying that this passage is gearing towards people that are less than 12 years of age, but that is usually what we call the formative years, where you're going to have a lot of value with your children, okay, in training them up in the right way.
Let me ask you this. Culturally, did men not leave the family home until they married? Do you know? In a lot of societies, that was the case.
Well, I have some extra notes here that says they have not attained adulthood, but some could still be living with their parents. And you could have had people that were in situations where they were, how should I put it? They were not wealthy enough to maybe move out of their parents' house.
Was Stephen living, was there indication he lived with his father?
Who that?
Stephen.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I just wondered if they used his house at the meetings or something.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So how about people still living with their parents? Do they still need to be managed?
Well, yeah.
You think so?
A certain amount of expectation.
There is a certain amount of expectation
Not as
that
like they did
there
in
should
the
be
past.
certain rules that should be followed and obliged if they're still technically living with their parents. Our next word is echo, and actually one of the programs that I have that pronounces these words gives it more of a guttural echo like that. So, which is like, the H in the Arabic language, which is, it's not Ahmed, it's Ahmed, you know. So, same kind of idea here. So
How do you spell that?
E-C-H. Oh,
How do you spell that?
Make it there. Okay. Now, echo basically is one of our verbs in this passage, and it's basically to stand in close relationship to someone, to have or have as. First, this is control of his children, and it must be constant, because here we have a present active participle. So this is a continuous action, once again, that we're doing here as well. The present tense of this verb, having, stresses the habit of his life. Okay? He must continually do this. Okay? So that is our next word that we're going to have, which I don't have on the board, so I'm going to have to.
What's the English word? Where are we?
Echo.
Okay, but where over here?
Oh, it is, what is the English word for echo, huh?
Having.
What's
Yeah,
that?
having.
Having?
Yeah, don't we have
Having?
having in our verbs? Where are we here in, well, it's basically keeping, I'm sorry. It's keeping.
Keeping?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
That makes sense.
yeah. And my next word here, I'm going to draw this up here for you. And this is Botage is our next word in this sentence, and it is a state of submissiveness, subjection, subordination, as opposed to setting oneself up as the controller. Okay? The children must be in subjection. So here in our words, must be under control. So basically, from our previous word, echo, he is keeping, okay, the children under control, okay? Children must yield to the headship of their father just as the wife submits to her husband. We see this in verse 2:11. So if you'll look back to verse 2:11 here, we see that a woman must quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness, okay? Paul wrote elsewhere that a pastor should have faithful children not accused of being riotous or unruly. And if you look at Titus 1:6, just flip a couple of pages over to Titus 1:6. This is once again another passage describing the overseer. Namely, if any man is above reproach of the husband of one wife having children who believe, not accused of dissipation, there's our word again, riotous, or rebellious, okay? The children must be believers who are not insubordinate, okay? Now, one of the things I did want to do, and I didn't leave any, I did leave some passages in that little handout that I gave you, was look at, what I want us to kind of understand something here is, even though it is the leader's responsibility, it's every father's responsibility to lead in his home, I don't want to let those people out that may be under the age of leading understand that there's not responsibilities on their part as well. And we're going to cover that in a minute, but let's look at some passages in Proverbs, okay? So we can kind of get an idea what Proverbs says about training children in the home. So the first one we're going to go to is Proverbs 20:11. 20:11. Now, what also makes a good leader? We talked about it already. He was able to teach. Able to teach. Okay? And what does able to teach mean?
He has the knowledge to impart to others.
He has the knowledge to impart to others. And what's a better receptive individual than his children? than his children, right? So Proverbs 20:11, and I'm in 26 for some reason, so I will fall back a little bit here so I can get to 20:11. It says, "It is by his deeds that a lad distinguishes himself, if his conduct is pure and right." So what does that say to you?
Lead by example.
Okay, well, he learns from your example, and he's going to follow your example, okay? And his conduct, hopefully, will be pure and right based on what he sees out of you. Let's go to 22:6. 22:6. One of my favorite passages in the entire world, because it's basically a great little clause. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." I call that the escape clause, okay? The escape clause. Because you may have a kid that will just go off the deep end. He just hits that age of late teens and he decided he knows everything in the world and you don't. But hopefully all of those years of things that you have trained and tried to inculcate into his brain waves, okay, might lead him back to the right path, okay? And that's why it is so important to teach them. 22:15. "Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will remove it far from him." Now, in the day and age in which we live, we can go to jail for that, you know? And I think it's absolutely pathetic because, you know, I can remember they even did this in schools at one time, people. And I can remember you stayed in line in those schools. Now we don't stay in line hardly at all in schools, and it's pretty much mass chaos because we've taken discipline out of the schools, and that was probably the last line of defense for many kids because they're not getting that discipline at home. Proverbs 23, we're going to read a lot, Proverbs 23, starting at verse 13. "Do not hold back discipline from the child. Although you strike him with the rod, he will not die." May sound like he's dying, but he will not die. "You shall strike him with the rod and rescue his soul from Sheol." What does Sheol mean?
Hell.
Hell, baby, okay? "My son, if your heart is wise, mine own heart also will be glad, and my innermost being will rejoice, rather, when your lips speak what is right." Now, what is that telling you right there?
When you hear truth out of their mouth. it
When you
warms
hear
your soul.
truth coming from your kid's mouth, that's a time to do the old jig. Okay? "Do not let your heart envy sinners, but live in the fear of the Lord always. Surely there is a future. Surely your hope will not be cut off. Listen, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way. Do not be with heavy drinkers of wine or with gluttonous eaters of meat, for the heavy drinkers and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe one with rags. Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Buy truth and do not sell it. Get wisdom and instruction and understanding. The father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and he who sires a wise son will be glad in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her rejoice who gave birth to you. Give me your heart, my son, and let your eyes delight in my ways." We won't talk about the harlot. All right, Proverbs 29:15 is my last one there. 29:15.
You and Mary are on the same page.
I have marked all this scripture.
They're all highlighted.
29:15. It says, "The rod and reproof give